Hey, Algebra 1, we're going to talk about 9-4, completing the square. Now, completing the square is based on that pattern we talked about when we have a square of a sum or a difference, where we're going to have x squared plus 2 times x times y plus y squared. Notice there's a y here, there's a y squared here. That 2. Why was there a 2? That's because if you FOILed it, the outsides and insides would be the same. So when I have x plus 5 quantity squared, x squared plus 2 times x times 5 plus 5 squared, and that's going to give you x squared plus 10x plus 25. Now we want to look at the relationship between these two numbers. If I take half of 10 and square it, I get 25. So that's kind of our basis for completing the square. I want to, when I have x squared plus bx and I want to find c, okay? C is that number that's going to complete the square. C is equal to b divided by 2 squared. Because see, there's always that 2. So I would take this 10 divided by 2 and square it. Okay, so that's how I find c. The other thing you need to remember is the factored form. Okay, I found c, that's what I'm going to add to both sides. The factored form is going to be x plus b over 2 quantity squared. Okay, so when I take that b and divide it by 2, okay, that's what goes in my factored form. Okay, for example, if I had x squared plus 12x and I needed to find c, okay, so I'm going to take b divided by 2, so c is equal to 12 divided by 2 quantity squared. Okay, 12 divided by 2 is 6, so I want 6 squared, and that's going to be 36. So my expression is x squared plus 12x plus 36. My factored form is going to take that 6. Okay. These are equivalent. If I FOIL this out, I get this. Okay. Shall we look at one more? Oh, let's look at one of the strange ones. What if I had x squared minus 5x and I needed to find c? So c is I take b, negative 5, divided by 2, and square it. Now I want to go ahead and look ahead to my factored form, because my factored form is going to be x minus, because that's negative, 5 halves, quantity squared. When I square this, I get 25 fourths, which is 6.25. That is C. Okay? That takes you through example 1. Now, example 2, I need a double column. Example 2 says, let's solve. So if I have x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 12, well, that's not a perfect square. So I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And you can probably do that in your head. You're smart. Okay? When I find c, I've got to add it to both sides. Okay? Now remember, c is b divided by 2 squared. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Now I'm going to have to get my factored form. So remember, when I took b and divided by 2, I had 3. So that's x plus, because this is a plus, 3. Quantity squared, 7 plus 9 is 16. Well, how do you get rid of a square? You do square root. Okay? The square root cancels the square. This cancels this. All I have left is x plus 3. Now, because I've got a variable involved, I have to consider both the positive and the negative values of the square root. Okay? How do I get rid of a plus 3? Subtract it on both sides. Negative 3 plus or minus 4. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. Negative 3 plus 4 is 1. If I checked those in for x, it would work. All right, let's try another one. If I had x squared minus 12x plus 3 equals 8. Okay, I got to get rid of that first. So I'm going to subtract it. X squared minus 12x plus blank, because I got to find c. 8 minus 3 is 5. Whatever, when I find c, I'm going to add it on both sides. All right, so c is negative 12 divided by 2 quantity squared. Well, negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. When I square that, I get a 36. Now my factored form is going to have that minus 6. Ooh, that doesn't work out very nice. Okay? So when I have this, and I'm going to do the square root to get rid of the square, then x minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 41. See, most of these aren't going to work out nice because this is where it's just like, you know, hey, get your calculator. What do you think you have one for? Use it. How do you get rid of a minus 6? You add it on both sides. 6 plus or minus the square root of 41. Okay, so you got to do it twice because you're going to get 2 answers. Okay, I never round this off until I've calculated my answer. Okay, it's going to give me a decimal. And we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, and I'm not going to work that out now. You can do that on your own. It's the steps on getting there that you need to know. Okay, all right. I want to look at example 3 because example 3 says, well, what happens if you have a leading coefficient? If you've got 3x squared minus 9x minus 3 equals 21, well, you know, I got to isolate my x squared. So I've got to get rid of that 3. So I'm just going to divide both sides by 3. It's an equation. I can do that. Okay? I'm just dividing everything by 3. That gives me x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 7. Got to get rid of that 1. X squared minus 3x plus blank equals 8 plus blank. Because to get rid of a minus 1, you're going to add 1. All right, I've got to find c so I can add it to both sides. And sometimes fractions aren't a bad thing, okay? So c is going to be negative 3 over 2 quantity squared, okay? And I'm just going to square that. That's going to be 9/4. Now, if you want, you can say, well, hey, 9/4, that's 2.25. And, you know, sure, over here it's easier to add. 10.25 equals, now my factored form, x minus 3/2 quantity squared. Okay, you could change that to minus 1.5. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so how do I get rid of a square? I'm going to do the square root of both sides. So x minus 1.5 equals plus or minus the square root of 10.25. How do you get rid of a minus 1.5? You add it on both sides. 1.5 plus or minus the square root of 10.25. And that's where you type it into your calculator. And I'm not going to do that. You can do that. Okay? Twice. Once with a plus, once with a minus. But let's look at one more. If I had negative 2x squared plus 36x minus 10 equals 20, okay? I got a leading coefficient, so I've got to divide everything by negative 2 because I want that to be a 1. So that gives me x squared minus 18x plus 5 equals negative 10. Okay? Now, you might be looking at that and say, ooh, that's a negative 10. It's not going to work. Well, you kind of know for sure. Okay, how do I get rid of a plus 5? Subtract it from both sides. And that's going to give me negative 15 over here. All right, C. Negative 18 divided by 2 squared. That's negative 9 squared. So that's 81. See, that's going to be fine. Okay? Because I can do that and still have a positive number. Now my factored form, x minus 9 quantity squared. All right, what's 81 minus 15? 66. Okay? And how do I get rid of a square? Square root on both sides. X minus 9 equals plus or minus square root of 66. Okay? X equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 66. This is where you type it into your calculator and get your answers. Okay? It's the process I want you to know. You can use your calculator. All right? We'll talk to you later. Hope that helps. Bye.